today's question is asking, with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, should James Gunn be considered the greatest comic book movie director of all time? Check it out.
Hey, John and crew. Hey, John, how happy are you that the Maples won? That's not my question, but I'm from Tampa, so it's kind of a big deal here, too. But I just wanted to call and ask a question. If you think that James Gunn is the best superhero director because of all of his movies have pretty much been bangers, I guess the Russo brothers are like close second in my opinion, but who do you think is the best superhero film director out of all of them?
All right. Thanks a lot for calling that in, man. It's funny because I was doing an Ask Me Anything yesterday, and somebody on the Ask Me Anything asked me a very similar question to this. All right. So Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is coming out. James Gunn, of course, is now the head of DC Studios. He's going to be, and his first really kickoff of his DC happens in 2025 with Superman Legacy, which he wrote and is directing himself. And I also believe they've already cast their Superman. They're just not letting us know who it is yet. So with the upcoming success of Guardians 3 and how successful it'll be, who knows, we'll find out. Should James Gunn be in the conversation of the greatest comic book movie director of all time? Now, understand, when I say in the conversation, let me qualify that. In the conversation does not mean in the top 20. I think if you're talking about in the conversation of the greatest comic book movie director of all time, I think you got to limit that list to like 3. So should James Gunn, understanding that my criteria of in the conversation means top 2 or 3, should James Gunn be in that conversation or maybe even considered actually the greatest comic book movie director of all time? I have 2 thoughts on this. Now, before we go any further, look, you guys all know who watch my show. I am a self-professed, unashamedly, big James Gunn fanboy. I don't like his movies because I like James Gunn. I like James Gunn because I like his movies. I think he's a terrific director. I just love his approach to film and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan. So let me give that preamble. Okay. So in the question of is James Gunn or should James Gunn be in the conversation of the greatest comic book director of all time, I have 2 trains of thought. On the one side, I think, yes, he should be in the conversation, if for no other reason but the pure consistency of excellence that James Gunn has brought to the comic book genre. Now, these numbers may surprise you, but let's take a look at this. In James Gunn's history of working on comic book material, here's his rundown, and look at these results. Guardians of the Galaxy #1 had a 92% critic rating and a 92% audience rating. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, 85% critic rating, 87% audience rating. The Peacemaker series, granted, a series, not a movie, but it's a film character and it's the superhero genre and it's in DC, so we're going to count it here, but that's why I put the asterisk there. But Peacemaker, a 94% critic rating and an 89% audience rating. His Suicide Squad movie, a 90% critic rating and an 82% audience rating. The Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, a 93% critic rating and an 80% audience rating. And as of right now, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is holding the lowest score that he's had at 78. Listen, when your lowest score is 78, you're doing okay. Good. 92, 85, 94, 90, 93, 78. That's just the freaking critic scores. Audience scores, 92, 87, 89, 82, 80. This is the kind of consistency you want to see. These are the types of numbers to a director who is in the conversation of greatest comic book movie director of all time. You're going to be hard-pressed to finding many others who have that kind of a track record. Not many. Not many at all. Okay. So on the one hand, that's why I think, yeah, James Gunn should be in that conversation. Maybe he is the greatest comic book movie director of all time. However, I do have the opposite, another side of the coin. All right. There's a part of me that doesn't feel he should be in there. And here's why. It sounds very simple. Maybe it's an oversimplification, but it's this. While Gunn has been consistently excellent, the reality is, for me personally, when I go down my personal list of the 10 greatest comic book movies of all time, not one of them is James Gunn's. I really love his movies, but in my personal top 10 list, None of them are James Gunn's. Now, you can talk about, if you want to talk about the greatest basketball player of all time, you can have, for many reasons, LeBron James can be in that conversation. Because in multiple facets, he's in the top. He's the number one scorer of all time. I believe he's the number, Ray, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's the number 4 all-time assist person. And I think he's like number 11 or 14 all-time rebounds. I mean, it's on every conceivable list, he's right up there. But with James Gunn in comic book movies, again, only my personal top 10 list of best comic book movies of all time, James Gunn doesn't have one. And that makes me ask, can you consider somebody the greatest of all time if they've never put in one of the if none of their films are in the top 10? It's like saying, can somebody be considered the greatest of all time if they never won a scoring championship? Can a player be considered the greatest of all time if they never won a title? You know, can any boxer be considered the greatest of all time if they never had a belt around their waist? And so in that regard, James Mangold, who did Logan, which I think is a top 2 or 3 best comic book movie ever made. I mean, James Mangold should be in the conversation before him. Obviously, Christopher Nolan with his Dark Knight films. The Russo brothers with Civil War, with Winter Soldier, with Infinity War, with Endgame. And I'm not saying all those movies are in my top 10 of all time. They're not. But, you know, Logan is, Dark Knight is. So I would say this, weighing those two things out, the angle of overall consistency, because again, bring that graphic up again here, Jonathan. The consistency, look at that. Look, I don't care whether you're a James Gunn lover or not, okay? I don't care. You got to pull your head out of your ass and say, okay, even if I don't personally like him because his movies aren't for me, which is totally fine, those are fucking impressive numbers. These are very impressive numbers. Like, you have to acknowledge that. It's cool to acknowledge that even if you don't like him. That's fine. But you at least have to tip your cap and say, that's a pretty damn good achievement, those numbers right there. A lot of directors and filmmakers would kill to have those kinds of stats. But for me personally, until Gunn makes a film that I would personally consider to be in the top 10 of all time, comic book wise, I don't think Gunn is in the conversation for greatest of all time. Not yet. And maybe Superman Legacy will change that. Maybe. But until that happens, that's just now, you may have different criteria. Anyway, Chris, let me go over to you here. There's a lot of angles you can look at this. Yeah. But if I were to straight up sit down with you and say, is James Gunn the greatest comic book movie director of all time? Or in that conversation, how would you see it?
I would pop him in the conversation.
Okay.
I would put him in there because I do love the first Guardians, and I really, really love the Christmas special. I think the Christmas special is magical.
The Christmas special.
I'm so excited to watch through everything before I see this on Thursday. I'm really, really pumped. But I mean, I also then, you have to do things on a case-by-case basis because, you know, Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite comic book films. But then, you know, Love and Thunder really didn't do it for me. So Taika's somebody who I think would maybe be in that conversation. But then his next film he didn't deliver for me personally, though it delivered for so many other people, right? Anytime we do these kinds of like top tier, best this, best that, it's so subjective that it's really hard to accumulate a list because really just depends on the actual content and story of what's delivered, right?
Yeah.
You know, the story of Ego really didn't resonate with me that much. My husband loves that story because he really, really gravitates towards stories that are about, you know, like father figures and, you know, disappointment in family and choosing your own family and things like that. So the second one for him, he likes even more than the first. Yeah. He's going to love Fast.
He's going to love Fast and Furious.
So those kinds of things really, really connect with him. So he definitely would think this is, you know, oh, of course, James Gunn is one of the top guys out there. But it really just comes down to your personal preference at the end of the day. Because for me, I'd look more towards, you know, the Russo brothers. Or maybe I know not a lot of people like it, but I think Kenneth Branagh did some really great Thor stuff that I think is really, really fantastic and very comic book accurate for the type of Thor he was doing. I think Christopher Nolan would be in there, you know. There's a whole bunch of other people that I would be talking about too, but it's so hard to say who the best is because their movies vary so much.
Yeah, and of course, just like anything else when we're talking about the art, it's going to be a subjective thing.
Exactly.
Absolutely it is. But since you asked me...
Oh, and Del Toro. Yeah, Del Toro. Thank you, chat.
But since you asked me, I would say as big of a James Gunn fan as I am, and as he has some of the most consistent numbers we've ever seen, until for me personally that he gets a movie in the top 10, I don't think he can be in my conversation personally. But the question is for you, most importantly, what do you think? Do you think James Gunn should be considered in the top 2 or 3, maybe the best comic book movie director of all time? What's your perspective on it? What's your line of reasoning? What kind of logic do you take to get to that conclusion? Whatever you guys think, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. We want to thank a sponsor of this video, Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, your utility bills and favorite streaming services, inflation is everywhere. Seriously, make it stop. Thankfully, there's one company out there that's giving you a much needed break. It's Mint Mobile. As the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you order from home and save a ton with phone plans starting at just $15 a month. You guys know that ever since I switched to Mint Mobile, I've been saving almost 70% a month over my old phone plan. For people looking for extra savings this year, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. By going online only and eliminating the traditional cost of retail, Mint Mobile passes the significant savings on to you. All of their plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea.